Today's episode is sponsored by Sweetwater. They wanted me to let you know that they are having tons of giveaways that you can follow the link in the description to check them out. If you're looking to buy a new guitar or other gear, Sweetwater is great because they offer you a wide selection as well as let you pick the individual example of a guitar that you would like. I definitely made use of that to create today's video when I picked the perfect Mike Ness Les Paul Deluxe. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Gibson has done it. They've made an official reissue of a Norland-era Les Paul Deluxe. This is the new Mike Ness signature Les Paul 76 Deluxe that we're going to talk about today, and I'm excited for it because I'm a big Norland-era fan. If you're not familiar with my channel, that's kind of how I got my claim to fame, by documenting the Norland-era models, and then I kind of switched over to some new guitars. We just do a whole bunch of stuff over here. So if you're interested in guitars and guitar-related content, feel free to subscribe. I upload every day around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But before we talk too much about this, let's go ahead and get our first impressions. So you're going to notice we have a reissue of a Gibson chainsaw case, which, if you guys didn't know, Gibson launched these a couple of months ago. We actually did a review and demo just on the case because I was so excited to see Gibson bring this thing back. But this is a new take on the Gen 3 chainsaw case. Obviously, it's got some modernized features like these bumpers on the bottom. We got the nice TSA latches instead of the metal ones. But it was kind of cool to see this guitar come with this, even though not technically era correct, because this is a reissue of a 1976 Les Paul Deluxe. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Man, that top, wow, that looks very close to a lot of the 70s Les Paul Deluxe. But it's this right here that made me want to document this. Say all you want about the aging jobs on this and all the other little nitpicky details that they might not have got 100% correct to a Norland era Deluxe, even though they got most of it. It's the headstock that made me want to document this, because as far as I'm aware, it's one of the only times that Gibson has went to the trouble to actually do the exact 70s Gibson logo. Like, if you just took a photo of this, sent it to me and said, hey, I've got a 70s Deluxe, I really would not know the difference because they match that so well. The headstock shape, the logo shape, and everything. Like, I actually brought a 77 Deluxe with me today just to show you guys that. Like, I'm sorry I didn't have a 76 with me, so 77's the closest I had. But look at that. The logo is nearly spot on. And the headstock size and shape, it's exact. It's very good. I gotta remember, every year is a little bit different on these. Every guitar is a little bit different, so there's going to be some minor changes. But for this, I think this whole reissue is a major win. But we'll get nitty gritty on the workbench. Let's learn a little bit about Mike Ness in case you're not familiar with him. Okay, Mike Ness. He is the frontman, the singer, the lead guitar player of Social Distortion, which is a very popular punk rock band. Mr. Ness has a cult following, and he's one of the more well-known guys for using a Deluxe. Like, whenever somebody tells me their tale of why they like a Les Paul Deluxe, I get two big names all the time: Pete Townsend and Mike Ness. Now, Pete, he's had quite a few custom shop recreations a few years ago, but this is the first time that Mike Ness has been honored. So this thing is based off of his favorite 1976 Les Paul Deluxe that he's modified. So, we get these stickers. They're not going to be for everybody, but it tells his tale. Orange County, that's where he grew up. He's representing his heritage there. We've got Woody the Woodpecker here. That's what it looks like to me, but no. This is the Clay Smith Cam's Mr. Horsepower, which is basically a caricature of hot rod guru Clay Smith and a mascot for an auto shop in California. Then our next feature here is the I Voted sticker. And other than that, you might be saying, hey, this thing has P90 pickups. How is it a Deluxe? That's what Mike Ness does to these. He buys old vintage Deluxe, he takes the mini humbuckers out, he refrets them if need be, and then bam, it's a Mike Ness Deluxe. I've actually sold him a Deluxe before. It was my old blue sparkle top, so if you ever see that on the stage, yep, it's the same one that's in this video, unless he owns multiples. But I've got to say, first impressions, when I saw this get released, I wasn't in love with the aging job, but thankfully Sweetwater had 4 of these for me to choose from, and I got to choose one that had a little bit more heavy aging right here where they dirtied the wood up, whereas on some of these it wasn't quite as consistent of a job. So aging aside, we can't really critique this one too much because that's just how his favorite one has aged, but they've got a lot of these specs fantastically good on this, and that's why I wanted to check it out. So we have the return of a sandwich body. So that is a small layer of maple in the center with 2 blocks of mahogany. That's something that Gibson did from 1969 until about 1976. Now, you can find them all the way until about 1979, but generally it's around 76 when these things start to fade out. So this is like a last year reissue of a pancake body. So that was cool to see. The only thing Gibson does not have right here is this is way too light to be a pancake. Man, they must have used some really high quality mahogany on these, because this is actually a really reasonable weight. We'll get that on the workbench. But then we also have a 3-piece maple neck on here with a volute, which is awesome. Now, unfortunately, they did not reissue the decal serial number, but they gave it a special MN079 for Mike Ness. This one's number 79 out of 100. And these things were expensive. That's the other critique that a lot of people are saying is $9,000 is a lot for a deluxe. I'm not going to say they're wrong, because that is very expensive. You could probably buy 2 originals from the year 1976, put era correct P90s in them, and you'd be about at the same. But those aren't quite as collectible as a highly limited custom shop recreation of an artist's signature model. So are you a player or are you a collector? That's kind of what will help you make this decision. I mean, you could also just buy a regular 70s Deluxe, the brand new model that you can check out in this video. Do a very similar thing. Now the specs aren't quite going to be the same, but you would get something very similar. Then you could do your own aging job. Back to the case here. I was telling you it's not technically era correct because, I mean, it's a Gen 3 chainsaw. These did not come out until 1980, so having a 76 with this, there were no chainsaw cases out in 76. They might have been like prototyping at that stage, but generally you don't see them till about 78. But maybe it's because he keeps his in a Gen 3 chainsaw. I just found it pretty interesting that they put a custom shop in this case, though, because I kind of more associate this with like USA level, but they are kind of expensive. I believe they're $250. But let's check out some of our case candy that we got in here. We get a pre-packed checklist that's all filled out with the information right here. Our COA booklet, Gibson Custom, nice and dark. And in here, we get a photo of Mike Ness. And then mine just happens to be serial number 79. That would have been awesome if I could have found 76, but I'll take 79 because that is a fantastic year for Gibson. And it looks like we get a brown backplate. Okay, if you don't want the medallion, that works. Got our switch tip in there. We've got Dunlop strap locks if you want to install those on your straps. Looks like they aged them a bit. Case key, regular hang tags. But what do we have here? A fake rose. Or is it real? It's almost like they freeze-dried a real rose, but I believe this is not real. And we also have a little skeleton on here. I love it when Gibson does interesting case candies with these high-end guitars. I mean, if you're paying collector prices, you might as well get something to brag about. Like the Slash had a big strap. Chuck Berry got a bolo tie, and this one has a fake rose. Awesome. And looking at this photo, it looks like he might clip one to his headstock. That might be a signature. So I was a bit on the fence about this thing, but now that I have it in my hands and I got to pick the one that I wanted, so far I'm really happy with this. I'm looking forward to the bench teardown segment that we'll do here next to show you all the little things they got right and the one giant thing that really upsets me that they got wrong about this thing. Potentially anyways. So let's go ahead and throw this on the workbench, take an individual look at its parts and specs, and then get to that playing demo. Alright, inside the Mike Ness Les Paul Deluxe, we'll kind of compare it side by side with this 77. Again, remember, there's small differences year to year, but generally speaking, I've now found 2 big sins that bug me about this reissue, potentially. So let's look at this first off. This has P90 pickup stock. That is what he does to Deluxe. It would have originally started out having these mini humbuckers just like this mounted into the guitar. And in case you don't know, you can pop mini humbuckers out and put P90s in. They are a direct route fit. However, you can't do that with this guitar because they've specifically routed it for P90s. You see how shallow this route is? His original Deluxe does not look like that. I can 1000% guarantee you, because initially a Deluxe would look like this in its pickup cavities. It's a much deeper route and it would have a metal base plate on it. So essentially all of this would be routed out and you wouldn't have this shelf. But since it started life as a Deluxe, those base plate screws would have 2 big ones right here. So you would see remnant holes right here. And then you can always tell if somebody has put P90s in a Deluxe because you'll have the P90 screw holes right here. So that's something, since they were advertising this as like a replica, I feel they dropped the ball a bit right here. The other spec they did not get right is 2-piece maple top. This is the 3-piece maple top era. I mean, you can see this one, 1, 2, 3. Now, it is possible that his is a freak and it has a 2-piece under it, but the fact that it's a gold top makes me think, nah, that was just a cost savings measure. And you're probably saying, hey, Trogly, why does that even matter? It's a gold top. You can't see it. Is this just because, you know, your collector senses are tingling or whatnot? No. Hear me out. You see this? This has an area of wear right here. A lot of 3-piece tops will have a seam line right here. So we would technically be able to see the 3-piece top right here. Unfortunately, I do not have really good detailed photos of Ness's original one, so maybe it's just possible his did not line up there, so they thought, hey, why even bother? But so far, those are my only 2 big qualms with this. Everything else way outweighs that. I am so impressed with the way this guitar feels. And the whole fact with the headstock that we'll talk about more here in a second. But anyways, it's just P90 Soap Bar aged. They're not like Seymour Duncans or anything like that. They're just in-house custom shop pickups with our P90s. And they do not have any foam blocks or springs or anything like that. So that's what Gibson was able to save by doing the shelf routes. And it keeps them in a set location. But as far as the cover, they're just slightly aged. They look like this. You also have to remember, these were not meant to be reissues of a 76 Deluxe. It's his 76 Deluxe. So, bridge and tailpiece are not the era correct Schaller made ones because he likes Tone Pros. And not just any old aftermarket part, these are locking Tone Pro systems. So that means you have these little Allen screws right here, that when you have it on the post, you screw those down and then it actually locks to it. That's supposed to give you better sustain. And when you're doing string changes, this isn't going to fall out on you. Your settings aren't going to get messed with. And hey, since you're mad lads, you might as well do that with your tailpiece as well. Tone Pros, and then the locking screws are on each side of these. Here you can see what I'm talking about with that screwed all the way in. That little screw blocks this from leaving because it's snug up against that. You can see that right there too. And over here, that one just screws into this post essentially and stops it from moving. Ultra secure. You'll also notice that this came stock from the factory top wrapped. So the traditional way to string up a Les Paul is like this. You run the string through here. To top wrap, you run the string this way, then wrap it up, and then go to your headstock. It depends on your neck angle which one is better for your guitar, but some guys that like to deck down the bridge like to do that in order to lessen this break angle right here. Some guys think it feels slinkier. So that's a spec of that there. So let's just take a second to appreciate this aging job. I think they really did this one justice, at least on this particular aged one. Remember, I cherry picked this one from Sweetwater because I thought it was the nicest looking one. So you've got some greening here. They dirtied up the wood because naturally, if you're strumming away in this area, you're going to dirty that up. Now our poker chip here does not actually have any wordings on it because it's been scratched off. Here's what a vintage one looks like. That does indeed happen. You've got some greening on the side. You've got all the finish checking, lots of nicks and dings. I mean, as far as relic jobs go, they're starting to get there, in my opinion. This is looking good. Got some more finish missing in this area. It's nice and smooth, kind of like a satin finish, but then the transition is a little bit abrupt here. Maybe they could work on maybe finding a way to smoothen that out in the future. And all the nicks and dings here. We got our Woody Woodpecker guy. And then, hey, check out our knobs. They did a pretty good job at replicating these. And you gotta remember, maybe his were replaced on his guitar, but Deluxe knobs are very special. You see how these ones have aged and they got like a yellow hue over top of the silver topper? That would have been cool to see. But again, who knows, maybe his were replaced. But he does have this little piece of tape right here that has an arrow pointing to it. What annoys me, though, is what does he have it set to, though? Maybe if I look at some concert footage, we could find out, but that lines up perfectly with these numbers. Then underneath our pickguard, they also did some finish checking and aging. So yeah, great job so far. But hey, check out all the finish checking when looking at it at this angle. That's some pretty extreme stuff. But it doesn't always look like that. It just depends on your lighting. Harsh or soft. But if you're curious if his was a Nashville made or a Kalamazoo made one, it's Nashville because of the Nashville style studs. Unless he took an ABR one out and put that in there, but I hope not.
Something else we could look at is like the side marker inlays if they had made them out of tortoiseshell, but I'm not sure if Gibson would have looked at that and then replicated it. But it's pretty safe to assume his is a Nashville one. So moving on from our pancake mahogany body with 2-piece maple top, we've got a 3-piece maple neck, which is a correct spec, and a rosewood fretboard. Exactly what you have on the originals. However, a spec that's different is it has 22 jumbo frets. Perhaps that's just the closest thing to what the Norlin era ones have, but those are mainly known as like low wide frets, not fretless wonders. Those are low thin frets. But I'll show you a comparison to my original 77 here. See, they just don't quite stick up as much. Whereas these have a little bit more of a crown. Honestly, I'm glad he did that. Brings modern playability to his. But if we're getting really nitpicky here, look at the way that they did the fret nibs on this. That's a modern style. They're very nice and rounded, and honestly, I gotta say, the fretboard on this is fantastic. I don't see all the tooling marks that we used to see. So they upped their game a little bit on this example. But now compare it side by side. The Norlin era fret nibs are always kind of blocky. They were never perfectly rounded off like that. So do you want to knock a few cool points off for them not doing that? Yeah, maybe, but it's not that big of a deal. And not all deluxe inlays are gonna yellow like this one. This one might have been in some sun, or it just might be the particular batch. But these definitely look a little bit too stark white. Maybe they could have dyed those a bit. But again, maybe his just looks a bit different. Gibson wasn't replicating my 1977, it was his 76. And then they put a nylon nut on it, so maybe his has a nylon, because originally that would not be there. So this one measures 1.65 inches at the nut width, which is a little bit skinny. For comparison, mine is 1.67. 12th fret on Ness is 2.04, and pretty much the same on the original. So that's all within spec. I mean, things will vary slightly. But first fret neck depth on Ness is 0.85, then by the 12th A1. So they call that the custom Mike Ness profile, but at the 11th fret it's 0.95 because you're kind of starting to hit that heel. So that should be very similar to his. And feeling the necks real quick here, they feel really similar. That's why it's so strange picking this one up, because it feels like that, but I hate to say it, better because of the really lightweight resonant body this one has. Here's what the neck profiles look like. First fret, 12th fret on the Ness, and here it is on my original. So it looks like he might have slightly beefed the neck up just a little bit. Or his was just naturally like that. Remember, back then it wasn't necessarily a set neck profile. It was just, you know, whatever the worker did. Some of them came out a little bigger, especially if they were Kalamazoo made. Those are generally larger. But most of them were pretty thin neck profiles. But now the headstock. Again, thank you Gibson so much for actually doing the real logo. Or should I say thank you Mike for making them do that. It's scary to see a new guitar look exactly like an old 70s one. Here, we'll do a side-by-side comparison for you. And now just an overlay of the logo. Now mine, it's a pretty clean condition one. So it's funny when the reissue is more aged. But check out the work they did on the truss rod cover here. It's got some chatter marks, a little bit chipped off right there. It looks like they just cut it right there. Maybe his is fully chipped, but they wanted to make sure that it would still secure. But you want to see something freaky? Compare it to a real one. The font is just a little bit thinner on this reissue one, and I'm kind of glad they made a slight difference, but they got a lot of the nuances correct. It's crazy. Now you might be asking, hey, what's going on with our tuners? Ness's looks like this. But my original one looks like this, has the big old washers. There's different kinds of tuners that you can find on different kinds of years. We'll see that a little bit more on the back, but these are the Gibson flower tuners, and they just look like that. If his looks exactly like this, that is the original style, but I think he's replaced his, because generally you would find double ring tuners, but at least he kept the bushing style instead of reaming it for modern day screw-on bushings. So that's what the guitar looks like without a pickguard, and here's the pickguard itself. You can see it's got little cracks right there. So those are replicating cracks that are on his pickguard. Now what it looks like to me is they just took a really shallow razor blade cut to it and then added some dirt to it instead of actually cracking it. But you wanna know what's funny? Look right there. Even on my Deluxe I have that same crack forming. But that's a cool little coincidence. They crack like that for a reason. Stress in this area. All right, let's explore the backside of these Les Pauls. So here's where a cavity looks like in the Mike Ness. Is this what a 70s Les Paul Deluxe looks like? No, not in the slightest. But we've got Gibson branded pots, and it's wired up in this style. They do have the correct tiny little capacitors though. Now this could be his was rewired like this, or it was another artistic liberty of the custom shop. Here's what a stock mid to late 70s Deluxe would look like. You'd have the pots on the shielding tin. They actually have the larger disc capacitors now that I look at it, so unfortunately they didn't quite reissue those. But it's possible his could have had that because these do start to change around now. But these guys have the circular route in the body. It looks like they went ahead and did that. But these also have the shielding tin over top of all that, which, again, that could just be something that he removed. That's very common for people to wire these things up 50 style. You'll notice this one has a grounding wire coming out there and then getting attached right here. Whereas in this era, stock from the factory anyways, most of them didn't have a grounding wire. They just relied on this whole grounding and shielding tin. Something else I noticed is their shade of brown is slightly off. Now this is pretty consistent in the 70s, so they needed like a little bit more of a reddish tint, because what they have here is just a little bit too dark. But unless you're comparing it side by side, who's really gonna notice? But it is great to see that pancake body. That's like one of the cooler features of this guitar, that we have a reissue of that. Now, if you remember from my conversation earlier, 76 is when the pancake starts to get transitioned out. This 77 does not have a pancake body. But that doesn't mean some of them out there won't. But hey, look at that. They do have the thick binding in the cutaway like they're supposed to. But they've aged this all up. Scratched, dinged, checked. They really went to town on these. I really wish they would publish photos of Ness's original so we could actually compare it to these ones. Maybe we would be shocked at how different they actually are, and that's why they don't. But so far, I'm very happy with this one. And of course, we have our Dunlop strap locks. That's what original style would have looked like. So now we got our 3-piece neck. He's got a whole bunch of dings up here. Is he soloing all the time? I'm not sure. The neck's aging, not my favorite on this example. Like, that looks overly dirty, but then again, he's playing a lot more shows than I ever will, so maybe his is closer to that. But I just feel with this really bright maple color, that ultra darkness kind of looks off-putting. Because generally, when you do get neck wear, it doesn't get quite that dark. Here's what my minty-looking neck looks like. The volute on this reissue, a little bit more pronounced than some of them can be. Unless his was a Kalamazoo, and they didn't get the binding side markers right, because the Kalamazoos will have big humps. So just get a good look at that. Now a good look at the original. It's more of a softer transition right there. But here you can see the Gibson Kluson Deluxe tuners that they have on this one. Looks like he might have had a little bit of wing separation on his, so they replicated that there. We've got a bunch of wear on the top of the headstock. And I really wish Gibson would do more of the use his exact serial number and then do a limited edition number down here, like they did with Adam Jones, because that would just be freaky to see a reissue of the decal serial number, because it's in 1977 when this style that is used yet today was first introduced. The tuners on my original one looks like anyways. But again, this is the style you normally find. The only thing left to do now is capture our weight, which is an unheard of 8 pounds, 9 ounces. You don't find that in the Norlin era. 8.5 pounds? No wonder I like this thing so much. It has all the specs I love, but it's not a boat anchor. I mean, you're lucky, absolutely lucky, if you find one at 9 or 9.5 pounds. But 8.5, no. That would be very, 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 very rare. And of the 4 Sweetwater got, I think 3 of them were this exact weight, and the other one was just a couple ounces heavier. So I think they are all pretty similar when it comes to weight. So maybe his is a magical unicorn example that was pretty light. But there that is in kilograms. Let's, just for fun, compare it to my other one. That weighs in at a whopping 10 pounds, 4.6 ounces. All right, let's go ahead and plug the mic Ness in and hear how it sounds. All right, let's go ahead and get our social distortion on. Okay, so first things first, this neck pickup is incredibly aggressive straight from the factory. Remember, these aren't on springs. I didn't mess with any of that. That's just how it's set from the factory. Now this neck pickup is just this juicy and fat. Whereas compared to the bridge, it's almost like there's nothing there. But then the middle position like blends that together and you get some interesting stuff. So I think that gives you enough of an idea on the cleans. Let's try some distorted tones. Man, this thing sounds great. I mean, I generally like P90 equipped brand new gold tops, but this one, it's got a little bit something special to it. Maybe it's from the pancake body construction, or it's just the signature guitar phenomenon. Like, I like Social Distortion. I like a few of their songs, but I wouldn't call myself like an ultra fan, so I'm not necessarily the prime demographic for this guitar, but yet I still feel it. I like everything about this. So far, the only thing playability-wise I'd want to change is raise that bridge pickup up a tad. Now that we know all about the first 2022 guitar that I've reviewed on this channel, the Ness Signature Les Paul Deluxe, what are my final thoughts on this thing? I was a little bit skeptical coming into this, I'll be honest. Like, I love the Norlin era, and every time Gibson tries to reissue it, there's always a few things that they don't get quite right. That way they can get it better the next year or whatnot, but gotta say, pat yourselves on the back, Gibson. This is
fantastic. Sure, there's a few things that we could have did to get it closer to Norland's spec, but then again, I haven't seen his original, so I mean, a lot of these critiques are just if his is not a weird anomaly. If you're looking for a really lightweight Norland era style Les Paul Deluxe, I really suggest actually trying one of these to buy it as a player. That seems crazy at these collector's prices, but it just looks the part so much. I've fallen in love. It's great. I kind of regret pre-selling this one to somebody through my new Guitar Day program, because it's nice. I could sit and play this for a long time, even non-social distortion style riffs. So yeah, I hope this video helps you see this guitar in a new light. If you didn't like it before, do you like it now? But if nothing else, hopefully you have a better understanding of it. All right, troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on your next daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Take care.